Hello, hello. Welcome to What's Working Now. I am your host, Katie Richardson, and we have an amazing guest for you today. Today's guest is actually a client of mine. It's a CEO who came into my world. We did a podcast interview, and come to find out, just really amazing, exceptional guy. And he's going to do an amazing job telling you his story. His name is Leonard. He is a man who lives to enrich people's lives. And I am here to validate that and say, yes, he actively is continually looking for more ways to enrich people's lives. He does that through his company, DML, and his podcast, The Prosperity Perspective. He holds an economics degree from Yale and an MBA from UCLA Anderson. Long story short, very smart individual. And he's on a mission to live life with purpose. Leonard, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Katie. Excited to be here and share some thoughts and hopefully enrich people's lives along the way.
Yeah. So you have an amazing story. And today I really want to do as best I can, help people see and relate to your story. And something that I shared with you right before we hopped on is that oftentimes incredible CEOs and entrepreneurs live in a lot of pain without realizing that they're necessarily in pain. They have this high tolerance for pain. And when you and I met, you had done some really amazing things. You had this beautiful resume. You'd been on very high level at T-Mobile and Nestle, and hardworking individual who'd experienced a lot of really exceptional things in the business world. So take us back to share a little bit of that, of your story, like some of the things that you had done and accomplished and kind of where you are when you and I met.
Yeah. So if we go way back, my dad was born and raised in Hong Kong. And I bring that up because nothing but the best was acceptable to him and my mom growing up. Right. So you hear the stories of tiger parents. That was 100% true. Anything less than an A just wasn't living up to my potential. And I had a lot of potential, right? And so I went to all the gifted classes my senior year in high school. I think I took 5 AP classes out of 6. Like, it was just not normal. I went to Yale. Ironically, I went to Yale, but I was super bummed because I actually wanted to go to Stanford or Princeton, and I didn't get into those two schools. So that was seen somewhat as a failure to me at the time. Because it wasn't where I wanted to go, right? Like one of the best schools in the entire world, and it wasn't good enough. But this idea of always achieving and always living up to your potential was something that was instilled in me in an uber age and driven, right? Like, hey, you need to be the best at whatever you do, right? And so that was school, that was soccer. I played on, for youth national teams, representing the US overseas. I played in college, played semi-professionally, right? And it was always nothing but the best. And so I indoctrinated myself to essentially achieve the best. And the best was largely based on my dad's perspective of what success meant. And that meant having a really good job, working for a big company, taking care of the family, big house, all of those things. And so I fell into a role at Nestle at the time, and started to move very quickly, right? So for the next 8-ish years of my career, I got promoted every 9 to 15 months into a new role. Within 18 months of being at Nestle, I was running North and South America for my function in procurement at the time. Then I went over to marketing. As part of that marketing, I was at Cannes Lions as a Young Marketer of the Year, right? So people who are in the marketing space know how prestigious that is and whatnot, right? And so did a lot of amazing things. Got my MBA part-time, went and worked for T-Mobile, was essentially on a fast track to be an executive at a very young age. That was what I was told was success. And that's what my upbringing conditioned me to what success was. But in terms of, what I felt and how that was like, right? Like when I was with T-Mobile, I moved every 9 months. When you move every 9 months, you're very hesitant to put roots down. And so you don't have friends. And I was traveling, right? And work came first, and you have to give up a ton, right? When I was playing soccer as a youth, I was traveling every single weekend, right? I didn't have a opportunity to go with the family and, have a beach day on the weekend and just hang out and build those. I built relationships, but in a very different way, right? And so tremendous trade-offs along the whole journey to kind of get where where I was, and to have the opportunities that I had, right? And my wife articulated to me as I kept moving, one of the questions she was asking me was like, hey, when's it going to stop? And so what she meant by that is, after 9 months, I'd get promoted and I'd have this renewed energy because I'd be learning something new. And I love learning, right? Love excelling in something new. But I'd be working more, I'd be working harder, I'd be traveling more, right? And so really what she was saying is like, hey, I'm feeling disconnected from you, right? And the more I moved up, the more disconnected I became. And that pattern continued, right? Because success.
And your thinking in those times was what? Like, yes, you could see that you were disconnected, but what were you thinking in those moments?
In those moments, I had no idea I was disconnected.
Okay.
There was zero awareness.
You couldn't feel it. Wow.
I couldn't feel it, right? Her response was, when's it going to stop? And it's like, oh, at the next stop or the next stop, right? And the next stop would come and it didn't change, right? Because you assume, hey, I'll move up, I'll have people who work for me, I won't have to work as much, right? It'll settle down. That's never the case, right? The more you go up, the more pressure you've got. The goal for me was always. So in a
sense, you were thinking, sorry.
Yeah.
In a sense, you were thinking like, this is just for a little bit longer. It'll get better in 9 months. It'll get better after the next thing. So you kept thinking it would get better, essentially.
Yeah. The target was always moving, right? And so it was like, hey, I'll get there and it will get better. Problem was I'd get there and then it'd be like, hey, there's another target, right? And it's like, what does that look like? So the ultimate goal for me was to be a multinational CEO, right? So I speak Chinese, I speak Spanish, I've lived in China, I've lived in South America, I lived in Spain, mostly doing work-related things, some study abroad in the China part. And that's where I wanted to go, right? And so everything along the way was just a stepping stone to get to the ultimate, right? And so to your point, what did that look like? It was like, oh, I'll run, and I'll get to a point and then I can slow down. It never slowed down, right? Like it was just looking back, I can tell you I created this. I was in this world where that was my reality, right? Where it was like go, and I couldn't see beyond that, right? And my wife was trying to give me hints along the way that looking back, I can see and I can appreciate, because she was the one that was closest and she was moving with me, right? And ultimately, when I chose to leave that path, it was because she asked me if I wanted to have kids. And I was like, of course, we've talked about this, I want kids. And then she was like, what kind of father do you want to be? I'm like, what kind of question is that? I'm going to be an amazing father. And she's like, but this and this and this and like things I had no idea about, right? Because to me, in the moment, it's, hey, I got to get this done. I've got to go network and I've got to have the right political capital so I can move up to the next stop. I've got to make sure I do my job and I do that very well. I've got to do extra projects, right? And so it was very the things I needed to do were pretty clear. The sacrifices I was making and the choices I was making weren't apparent to me at the time, because that was the only thing I knew, right? It was like, hey, the goal is to get there. And the thought process is, once I become the CEO of a multinational, I'll be rich. I've got money. I can do whatever I want. We can travel. We can, it takes 20 to 30 years to get there, right? Like, so effectively I was saying, hey, I'll take 20 to 30 years. I'll put my head down, but you're trading those 20 to 30 years for a future that you don't know about, right? But what I was feeling in the moment was like, hey, I'm a little closer, right? And every promotion, and they were happening so fast, right? It was like, I'm on the right track. I'm moving forward, right? Like, this is all good. I'm working longer, but that's okay. I'm exhausted, but that's okay, right? My MBA program, I did part-time, right? So every Saturday for 3 years. So I effectively had a 6.5-day work week for 3 years, where I was just investing, right? And it was all to get ahead, right? Or be the best.
Yeah. Liam, this is fascinating. And I intentionally wanted to really slow this piece of it down because, hearing your thought processes and where you were focused and what your attention was focused on, and what you were not really aware of at the time. And your wife was attempting to like, hey, what about this over here? I think your story is going to be really relatable to so many entrepreneurs and CEOs because we have this strong desire for a better future. And we understand it's going to take hard work and commitment and sacrifice and even investing in ourselves. And you've done a good job of describing how that was. And you were definitely living all of those things to the extreme, right? And this ability that you've developed as somebody who went to Yale, as somebody who was on a semi-pro soccer team, you developed this ability to do hard work and to really push yourself beyond the limits. And probably there were times in your life when that was really benefiting you and it was helping you get ahead of the people around you because that high level of commitment, that hard work was the thing that was moving you past the people on your left and your right? You were getting all of the promotions, not the other people, because you were working harder than they were. And so this, in a sense, this ability to work harder than everybody else was getting you ahead in life, right? And you were looking down the road 20 to 30 years, might be another 20 to 30 years before I get to where I ultimately want to go, but I'm committed and I'm willing to do the things to get me there. So you're doing this and you even start having kids. Tell us about what started to happen in your life once you started having kids. What did that look like?
Yeah. To touch on what you were talking about as well, right? The model, right? If you look at any of the sports documentaries that are out there, right? You've got Brady's, I think it's The Man in the Arena, right? You've got Jordan's Last Dance. Every single one of them talks about how they're there before everyone else and they're there at the end, right? And it's hard work or more time or, pour yourself in, you get better, right? You talk about Gladwell's Made to Stick, the amount of hours to become an expert, right? All of those things condition your mind to say the more time you put in, you'll get ahead. So once I started having kids, right, there was a turning point, right? So T-Mobile at the time, I was ready for the next promotion. They were going to move us again. And my wife basically threw down an ultimatum in not so direct ways. My wife is very supportive, right? But, and thank God I saw the message, right? Which was basically like, are you choosing me or are you choosing the job, right? The job was going to take us to Baltimore or Cleveland. She didn't want to be there, right? She wanted to start a family. And what's more important? And thankfully I saw that and I was able to take a breath and I quit. So I left T-Mobile at the time and we decided to travel and to kind of decompress, and we were going to take some time. We were going to figure it out. And lo and behold, 4 months into that, she's pregnant. And it was like, okay, got to get back and figure out what we're going to do. And so that's where I started up the company that I'm at today, right? So once we knew we were pregnant, then the question was very quickly like, okay, how am I going to provide for the family? And as we were starting up the company, I followed the same kind of blueprint I had before, right? Which was, okay, I see the opportunity. I know what I need to do. And it was just pouring myself in, learning everything I could, growing the business, continuing to accelerate. So those first couple years of the company were hard work, but we started to see some success. First child was born. And then when he was, 6 months old, we found out, was it 6 months? Yeah, it was roughly 6 to 9 months. We found out we were pregnant again on a not so planned second child that was coming. And it was like, oh crap, what are we going to do now, right? And then the questions about space in the house come up, right, and what that's going to look like. And so that just put more pressure of like, okay, how are we going to provide for the family? We've been living off savings. The company was starting to show profit, which was good, but it wasn't enough to support, myself and the partners at the time. And so it had to grow. And so we continued to grow. We started to hire, and it got to the point where I was probably working a slow week was probably 80 hours. An aggressive week was probably 120 hours a week. Wow. For probably about 24 months. So there was a long period where the mindset was just, I'm going to outwork every single other person. I'm going to make sure I chase down every single lead, every single possibility. And I'm going to grow this puppy as fast as we can. And we experienced success, right? And we were growing. Yeah. It was great, right? There was a point that was very fulfilling because, particularly as I go back to the upbringing of my dad, right? Being able to provide for the family, have a steady job, good income, a roof over the head, food on the table, super important, right? And it was doing that. And it was growing, right? And as it was growing, it was like, okay, how do we keep growing? Well, follow the same blueprint, right? Double down, continue to work harder, continue to chase these leads, and continue to build from there. So my first child, he's 3 now, wasn't a huge part of his life for the first year, 18 months, right? And I kind of wrote it off as, hey, mom's there. He needs mom. He's going to be connected with mom. And, there was 1-to-1, so she could take care of him. And if she got him and she needed him to be quiet because he was sleeping, great, I'll go work, right? And so just worked, right? And then I just continued that kind of mindset and pattern.
This is so helpful. Something that drives you even then and now has been purpose. And you talked about ensuring that your family had a roof over your head and you were able to provide a living. Was that the main driver behind this like work mentality, or were there other things that were really driving you to push beyond your limits and to like really put your head down into your laptop and work and chase after these leads? What were some of those? I mean, yes, roof over the head, provide for the family. Were there other thoughts that you had that were really driving you to continue to push this hard?
One of the biggest ones was I didn't want to disappoint my dad, right? Making him proud, it has always been a huge driver for me, right? And when I left the corporate world, he questioned that, right? Because I was on a fast track. I was very well paid. We had a lot of comforts, right? I had made it at that point in his eyes, right? And to say, hey, I'm changing was like, what are you doing? Why are you throwing this away? In my mind is how I thought about it, right? And so then what started to fuel me was like, hey, if I don't make this uber successful, I don't know if my dad's gonna be proud of me. And so that just pressure I put on myself, right? I was living in my own world of what I interpreted, but it was all conditioned on experiences I had growing up, right? In terms of what I thought, how I felt loved, how I felt appreciated and valued, right? And what resonated with me most was when I achieved and excelled, right? And those were the times that he was happy, right? When I was underperforming relative to my potential, he wasn't, right? And so it was like, okay, you got to push, right? So I think that was a huge component. I hate to lose. I just hate it. I am not a good loser. And when I've had a lot of success, right? And when you've had the success, it breeds more success, but it also, there's this hyper competitive component where I've got to win, right? And I've got 2 younger brothers. If you want an intense environment, come play board games with us. And none of us like to lose. And it's just, it feeds on itself, right? And so that idea of okay, I'm going to go start a business that's more local, right? It's specific to a city. I'm going to be the number one in that city, and I'm going to be the go-to, and no one else can be better than me, right? I've got it. I know I can be better than anyone else. I've got the skill set. Let's go do it, right? And so that idea of being the best and being at top potential, right, continued to fuel that, right? I think there was also a consumerism and an ego side too, right? That said, hey, as you're more successful, you've got a bigger house, you've got a nicer car, you're doing all of those things. When I was living in LA, that pressure was massive. I think it's definitely a component of living in the culture in LA, and what you look like, what you drive, where you work, almost defines you, right? And so I had carried some of that as well, right? That's where a lot of my upbringing had been. Being in Seattle now had started to decouple that, but I mean, that's still there, right? And you want to show others like, hey, I've been successful, and I've got a fancy piece of paper, I've got a nice resume, but the things are the next thing that usually supports that. And so you couple all those things together, right? There's only one way forward, and that's work harder, Katie. Go work harder, go work more hours, right? Build the company. And that's what I did.
Was happiness ever part of the equation for you? Like, were you looking to be happy at all? I can only imagine working 80 to 120 hours a week. Like, yeah, is there time for moments of joy and experiencing life? Or was it like, I'll do those later, and right now I just need to have my head down?
Depends how you define happiness, right? So, and you laugh, right? And it's like, that seems like a simple question, but when you go back through what the upbringing was, right? For me, happiness was success, right? And so I felt happy when I was successful, or when I was learning, right? I love learning. So part of changing jobs every 9 to 15 months was I got to learn something new, right? And that part was really fun. I was in a super high pressure environment, but learning something new was exciting, invigorating for me, right? And so that part was a lot of fun, and I was happy, or I told myself I was happy, right? And I got little hits of dopamine along the way for sure, right? Which triggered happiness. I was traveling a ton, right? I love traveling. Traveling makes me happy. And the roles that I was in, I was traveling all over the place, right? I lived in Spain, doing a market research type of project, right? I had worked with North and South America. So I was in Peru, I was in Brazil, I was in Mexico, I had lived in China, right? And so all of those things, I was traveling around the US when I was with T-Mobile, right? Like all of those things were exciting for me because I was experiencing different cultures. I got to see different perspectives, and it all goes back to learning and enhancing, my knowledge or skill set. And so all of those things kind of kept propelling me, right? And then as I had more money and I was buying more things, right? The things gave you that instant gratification of that, like, okay, I'm happy. Okay, I'm happy, right? What does that look like? And my wife and I would take trips several times a year to international places, right? And those were great. So it got to the point where I'd work really hard and I'd look forward to, this 1 to 2 week vacation or break with friends, and we'd go do incredible things, right? Running with the Bulls in Pamplona, Oktoberfest in Germany, like some really iconic, awesome vacations. And I live for those moments, right? And so it was almost, we talked about trade-offs before, right? Like I'd spend 50 years out of the week, or 50 weeks out of the year working really hard for the 2-week vacation. And that's where I got that happiness, right? The rest was just the pain that was required to get to where I wanted to go.
Yeah. When you and I met, something that you shared with me was this: as you looked into the future, you looked at the life that you were living, you looked at the number of hours that you were working, and realized how long it was going to take to get to where you wanted to go. And in a sense, like putting off life in that journey. You talked about how, if I continue to live life the way that I am, I know there's going to be a point in my life where I look back and I really regret that I didn't make some changes. What were some of the things that were not in your life that, like, when you got really honest with yourself? Because it actually sounds like you were, for the most part, happy and achieving and accomplishing, and there was maybe even purpose in the work that you were doing, but there was something else that was not being fulfilled or seen or experienced in your life. What were some of those things that you thought were maybe missing or not working?
The biggest one was purpose or true fulfillment in any way, right? I was always running to achieve the next thing, but the achievement wasn't success or purpose for me, right? And as I started to reflect, the things that I were doing were great for me, and I was benefiting, right? The companies I was working for were benefiting, which by extension, the shareholders were benefiting. But as I look closer, right, some of the business practices just didn't make sense to me, right? So I go back, one of the examples that's super clear to me is when I was working in the accessory business in T-Mobile. One way that we grew the sales of accessories is we introduced financing, which allowed someone to buy a $300 speaker for $5 a month. Well, the people who were buying those were not the 1%. We're not your upper income folks, right? Like, they could just buy it if they wanted to buy it. The people who were buying it were the lower income families who really couldn't afford it. And so then you're selling a $300 speaker to a family that's worried about putting food on the table, right? But wants to make sure that they've got cell phones and plan, right? And they kind of get, and it didn't feel right, right? Like it felt like I was feeding into consumerism in a society that put a huge value on that. And given my experience of buying things, right, like I knew that was fleeting, right? And the only way to fill that hole was to buy more stuff, right? And it just made the hole bigger and bigger for me. And so that was a part that was missing, right? I also grew up in the church, kind of fell away from the church, right, as I pursued my personal goals, right, and trying to reconcile this. Like, where am I headed? What am I doing? What is that going to look like, right? Particularly when I had kids, right? It was like, hey, when I'm gone and they're looking back, what are they going to remember me for? And the path I was on was like, great, he's a CEO, he made a lot of money, he's a great businessman. And that was kind of it, right? Like, I tried to give back, we donated, right? But it felt like I was checking a box and it wasn't super real, right? And so that part was missing. The physical exercise was missing. So I played soccer to semi-pro level, and I hadn't worked out for like 2 years, and like it just boggles my mind looking back, right? And just not taking care of my body, and as a result, I was extremely fatigued, and I was powering through, and I was persevering because I've been conditioned to do so, and I know how to take the pain. But then the weekends would look like I'd sleep for 12 hours because I'm just trying to catch up, right? And then the relationship with the wife and the kids, right, is non-existent, right? You're missing those time periods, right? So I think those were some of the components that was like, something here feels like it's not quite right.
Yeah. And that feeling is just that. It's a feeling, and it's not knocking on our door a lot of the times. It's not waving its hands and trying to get our attention. A lot of times when we're missing that purpose, we hear it in the quiet moments of the day, right? As we're trying to fall asleep at night, as we're waking up in the morning, as maybe we're driving in the car, and we have a moment to actually be still and think and reflect. And, so that was nagging at you a little bit here and there, but what finally happened for you where you were really honest with yourself and saying, okay, how I'm currently living my life is not okay? What did things look like in that moment, and how did you kind of wake up to the truth that something had to change?
Yeah, I think when you're working that much, you're making a trade-off on, you're effectively shortening your lifespan, right, to work that hard to get ahead currently. And as I started to think about it, it's like, do I really want to do that? Do I want to trade health for wealth? And that didn't make sense for me, right? And it goes back to kind of trying to recoup on the weekends and get recharged to be able to go and do another 120 hours, right? My oldest son would say things like, go away, daddy, or go back to work, daddy, or I don't need you, daddy, right? And mom would be the one that was putting him down and, taking care of all those things. And, he would fight me in the evenings when I was trying to help out. And so I would just acquiesce and I'd let mom take it, right? And then mom would come in and take it and I'd go work, right? And it was like, it started to eat away at me, right? And it goes back to the question my wife asked, right? Like, what kind of father do you want to be? And it was like, my kid is actively rebelling and he's probably calling out because he wants more of my attention and I've got nothing to give him, right? And Rachel, my wife, would want to do things and I'd either be too spent on the weekend to be able to do anything with the family. And when I started to think through, like, what kind of family did I want to have, and what kind of father did I want to be, and what did I want to be remembered for, none of the things that I was living aligned up with that, right?
Wow.
Outside of, hey, successful person, right? But like, there's so many ways to be successful, but I wasn't a great father. I wasn't a great husband. I wasn't a great boss, right? I was running my team through the mud, right? Because I'm chasing everything. I could do it, right? Because I knew how and I'd been conditioned how. Others couldn't really, right? And so I'm putting tons of pressure on them and they're not executing the way, and they're working long hours and they're miserable and their wives are starting to have conversations with them. And it just started to weigh heavier and heavier that we started to experience attrition at work, right? My kids started pushing back, right? My wife was doing her own thing. There wasn't any commonality. And it was like the feeling, to your point, right? And it's like, something needs to change. Like, we can't continue to go on this path. And so I started to go on this journey of like, why am I here? What do I want to be known for? Right. Went through, if I was going to write my own obituary, what would it say? Right. And it's like, hey, you go write that of what you want it. And then you look at your life and you're like, those two things don't match up, and they're not even close, right? And the more I started to explore that, and at first it was just moments, right, of like, oh, that doesn't feel right. And then I went through an exercise and spent 10 minutes at first, then 30 minutes, right, and then an hour, and it was just like, and so I started searching, right? I was like, I know I need to get off this path, but I didn't have a role model. Like, I knew nothing. The only role models I had were multinational CEOs, right, or successful people, and it didn't resonate, right? Like, I didn't know where to go, and I didn't have anyone to look up to that essentially modeled the life I wanted, and so.
Which was what? Can we describe that? It's not like you decided, well, I just need to take things easy at work and not be as successful in my professional career. Like, what you were trying to figure out was how to continue to be successful in your work, but in a new way that allowed you to be present with your wife and actually have a relationship with your kids. And to your point, like, it's very rare to see that, right? Somebody who has a high level of success in their profession and is able to be present with their family.
Yeah. What did I want? I didn't know at the time, right? And that was part of the exploration, right? And I'd be lying if I said I have it all figured out, right? Like, still trying to grow and develop and figure out where the company's headed, what the company wants to stand for, right? Where I want to be, right? How we build those things, what's important. And they shift over time, right? So that's the tough part. It's not going to be static for like, hey, I figured it out, I'm going to live this way for the rest of my life, right? Doesn't work that way. And there were no role models, right? And there were no role models because the people who were doing what I wanted didn't care about being in the limelight, right? Like being out in front of everyone else and being the one who's out, like it, that wasn't them, right? And so everywhere that I was looking and what I was looking to become, going back to, I had to be first and I had to be recognized, right? All of those people that would emulate what I wanted or what I was feeling weren't in the space that I lived, right? And so trying to get to this point of, I'm still going to be successful, right? Like I can't not be successful in what I'm doing, but there's got to be a different way that I can go about it where, I put a higher value and emphasis on the family, on relationships, right? On my faith, on the community, on mentorship, on some of these other things. And how do we get there, right? And what are the trade-offs associated with it, right? Like I didn't know at the time. You kind of just, you assume, the assumption that you put in yourself in front of you is, if I'm going to choose this, right, which was family, faith, relationships, etc., then I have to give up being a good, the top of the business. And that's not necessarily true, right? However, in the time, it was absolutely true to me, right? And so letting go of like, hey, I'm going to be number one, I'm going to have this amazing business and I have to do this, was really difficult because it was the only thing that I knew. And it felt like I was giving up on a dream and what I'd been trained and conditioned to do, to be able to try to pursue some of these other things that were really pulling at me in a meaningful way.
Man, such an incredible story. So many, I think, very relatable thoughts and perspectives. So you come into my world, and like you, I had been looking for a model, right? I wanted to be successful in business and was also looking for that model. And to your point, they don't make themselves very well known, and they're hard to find because they're just happy living their life and being successful in business. And so together, we've been working together, and I've shown you a different way of operating. How has that transformed your life? And, help people, like you've done an amazing job helping them see kind of the pain that you were in, the pain that you wouldn't acknowledge as pain at the time. And I think one important realization people need to have that you had was that you were the common denominator, right? In all of that. And that if your business and life was going to change, that you had to change. Right?
Yeah, for sure. Right. And I think in terms of how we came into each other's world, right, I remember that you were on my podcast. We had a conversation, right? I felt a connection in terms of just what you'd done, right? And you had asked a question of like, hey, how can I help? Right. Like, or you wanted to get back, and something called you to have us have a conversation, right? We have an hour conversation. Your response was, man. So normally in these conversations, I can give some tidbits of how to improve, but for you, you're messed up, right? Was ultimately where it came from. And that's
those were not my words, by the way.
Those are not her words. But it was
I remember what I said in that moment. I said, you are carrying a tremendous amount of weight. And I said, does anybody understand the gravity of your reality right now?
So the reason I articulate it the way I did is because I needed someone to kick me in the butt, right? When you're high performing and you're successful and you're at the top, you need someone who isn't going to sugarcoat or say yes, or like, hey, you're doing great. It's no, you need to make a change, right? And that's the part that stuck with me, right? Was like, yes, you put it in very approachable terms, but the message for me was like, oh, this is someone who sees somehow you saw the pain amidst all the other great things that I was doing, right? And so I think that's the key component, right? And then you talk about the common denominator of like, oh, she sees the true me, right? And then you've got a choice to make. You can reject that, right? And essentially say, I'm going to stay where I'm at. I'm on the right path, and I'm not going to be challenged. I'm going to keep going. Or you lean into it. Leaning into it is super scary, right? Because you make an acknowledgement that, in my words, you're screwed up, right? And there's something needs to change, right? And it presents an amazing opportunity, right? And the common denominator was clearly me when you take a step back and you look at it, right? Acknowledging that is very challenging, particularly for someone who's been so successful, right? Like, what do you mean I'm the problem? Look at my, like, I've got all these fancy degrees and success. And, but in reality, there were a lot of things that I wanted to change, and had to make the choice to lean into in a powerful way, to start to explore, right? And I think the timing worked out because I had started to feel and understand some of the pain along the way. And as a result, I was in a position where I was open to leaning into that challenge, right? And for me, I respond best to challenge, right? It goes back to being competitive, right? Someone tells me you can't do X, Y, Z, I'm going to go do it, right? Someone congratulates me and it's like, great, I was supposed to do that, right? I don't celebrate success well. I respond well to challenge, right? And I saw this as a challenge that I could lean into that solved or could potentially solve, right? Or at least give me guidance in a space that I was unfamiliar with, didn't know where to go, right? And so there was an invitation and I elected to kind of move forward with it, to explore it, right? To say, I don't know where this is going to take me, but this can't be the best way. Like, this can't be the best there is. And if someone else has got something that they can share with me and I can be better off as a result, then let me go at least explore that, right? And that's kind of that was the starting point, right? Was to have some awareness that something was off, right? And then making a choice to try to get better or lean into that to improve.
Yeah. And it is kind of a leap of faith, this understanding that there's got to be a better way of doing things. And something I want to point out to everybody who's listening, Liam has consistently been super coachable and open. And because of that, it allows you to like implement things very quickly. And your life has radically transformed. I mean, in the first 3 months, it radically transformed. We've worked together now 6 months. And like where you are now is a 180 degrees shift from where you used to be. So, help people see, just like maybe name a few things of where you were 6 months ago, and then contrast that with where you are now.
So we'll do a little before and after, right? So before 80 to 120 hours a week, now I work less than 40. Before, if there was an issue with the family during the week, the family was basically SOL and had to figure it out. Right? Whether that was whatever it took, because I was busy with work. Now, like last week, I took a day off because someone was sick and needed me at home. And I pushed all the work and allowed myself to lean into that. I take a lot more time with the family. So, I'm with them for breakfast and dinner every single day. Right. So there's hard guardrails around time that I'm spending with the family and when I choose to engage with work or not. Prior to that, right, I'd be up at 7, I'd be working. My wife would drop off breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right? And I'd give the boys a kiss at night. And that was kind of it. Before, my 3-year-old was fighting back and saying, I don't want you here. Like, I want mommy, right? And now it's much more hey, daddy, can you come play? I'm taking the time to do that, right? Before, if they were to interrupt me in the office, I'd be stressed, I'd be on edge, I'd be trying to get them out as soon as possible. Now they come in and I embrace that opportunity to connect with them in a meaningful way, right? And I might not get an email, I might get a phone call, right? But having that conversation with them. My team was also working long hours. Everyone was on, past 6. Now there are almost no emails after hours. The entire team has sort of emulated, right? I was leading from the top and they were following, mimicking what I did. And they haven't done that. And so attrition, right? Attrition at our worst point was about 55%, just an asinine number. And there are a lot of reasons that was there, and
Sure.
is way down now as a result of that. Before I felt like it was a never ending day. I had checklists and I was always trying to do every little bit, right? And now it's there's just one thing a day that I'm going after and accomplishing, right? And so the business has grown.
So good.
I'm referencing.
Well, and can we talk about that really quick? Like, because your business, it requires investors and it requires you to continually be growing the business so that those investors can always be getting a return. I think, 6 months ago, the Liam that I met 6 months ago was convinced that to go from working 120 hours a week to 40 hours a week would equal less revenue, fewer profits, fewer investors. And yet, what's the result that you've seen?
It's been the opposite, right?
Yeah.
Companies grown, investors have grown. All of those things are moving in a very, very positive direction, right? And that is, it's so counterculture, right? I'm still in it, so I can't, I still haven't fully digested it. Like, it doesn't make sense.
It's a paradox.
It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't.
I work less and I make more. The company that I impact more people's lives. Like, how does that work? But that's what's happened, right? And the focus on the minutia or the day-to-day, right, has just gone away, right? And this concern of, hey, I'm going to miss a deal or I'm going to miss an investor is just gone. And it's we're now in a place where people will opt in and they'll want to work with us, and we're not chasing after a bunch of people, right? This is who we are. This is what we stand for. We invite you to come be a part of this incredible thing and journey that we're on, and we'll take care of you and you'll be better off as a result.
Yeah.
And we leave it at that, right? And
so good.
Been very powerful in that regard.
Yeah, like you're no longer having to chase after investors. Originally, you said it was usually like a 3 to 6 month sales cycle to fully get an investor in. And now after one presentation, they're coming after you and they're saying things like, I'm ready. Where do I sign? And again, it's been a whole shift. I think some of my favorite afters for you, you said just the other day, Katie, something new happened. I woke up with a smile on my face and a song playing in my head. I think it was Walking in Memphis. And you're like, this is so new. I'm not used to this. And I know and another one that was really important for me, because I'm a parent, you said, something new happened. I was working in my office, and you have both a home office and you have a office, but you were working at your home office, and you said you could hear the kids giggling running up the stairs. And for the first time, you wanted to be out there with them. And you talked about previously, you just always wanted to be in your office. And, that was huge in my mind. The fact that this, not only were you creating a real connection with your kids, but that desire to continue to be connected with them was opening up and growing. And that is priceless. That is priceless.
Yeah. And that was a big part of what I wanted, and I didn't know how to go get, right? Because I'd never leaned into what that looked like, right? To go and build that and have the desire to do something other than excel in something, right? And so sitting in a park and being still and just having a conversation, I'm getting better at it, but uber difficult, right? Because my mind is always going to, okay, what can we improve? What are we going to do next? It's been wired for efficiency, and unwiring that to just play, right? Smile, dance, whatever those things are, has been a very fun exploration.
Yeah. So if somebody is listening to this and they're thinking, okay, so I'm getting in my own way, I'm overworking myself, and if I hear you right, Liam, I just need to stop working so much. Is that essentially what you've done?
No, there's so many other components that go along with it. I think working less is a byproduct, right? That's an output of making different strategic choices. in terms of prioritizing, what you want to focus on and where you're spending your time and all of those things. So that will happen if you lean in to making some big changes, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's a wonderful output, right? And it's obviously, if that's the goal, there's definitely a way to get there. But if you're working 80 to 20 hours a week and you just stop working and you do less, but you do the same stuff, nothing's
Yeah.
going to change. You're just going to feel angst and stress and frustrated, and not going to work, right? And so there's definitely bigger concepts that need to be unlocked and explored, right? Of which Katie has been wonderful in exploring and unlocking with me personally to get to that point.
Yeah. I would be curious to hear if you were to kind of wrap up and summarize what we've done over the last 6 months. How would you summarize that?
Number one is deprogramming, right? Taking all of what I've been conditioned and the experiences I've had that led to me doing things the way I did, or looking at society, right, and doing things based on what society had dictated or valued, and deprogramming all of that, right, to get down to what's at the core, right? What do you want to be? What do you want to do? And what do you want to live for, right? And so I think the deprogramming, as well as putting purpose and vision in place, hugely important, right? Those are probably two of the biggest components of that. Those two are the biggest change, right? And then there's been a lot of other components in terms of choosing how to live, right? Not being dictated. That concept is such an anomaly for people who are listening, who are in the 80 to 120 hours, because there is no choice. There's just stuff in front of you and you go get it done. When in reality, that's not the case, right? Getting out of a black and white world, living in a world that's full of color and music and smiling, right? Like all of those things are new things, right? That exploring, right? And so tremendous amount of change and difference that I've been going through, continue to go through, but have really enjoyed. And you asked a question about happiness, right? And much happier, much more at peace, much more fulfilled, and feel like I've got clarity and a direction of where I'm headed, why I'm here, what I'm looking to do. And again, I'm not perfect. There's so many things that can continue to improve, but at least I know I'm on the path that leads me to in the direction I want to go, right? And then it's about continuing to take feedback, looking, taking different concepts, continuing to move in that direction in a meaningful way.
Yeah. And what you're doing is absolutely incredible. Are you open to sharing a little bit of the details of, because you're not just building a business, Liam, you are building a company that both is enriching the lives of your employees, you're enriching your community. So share with everybody how you're actually putting that vision that you had, even when you were working 80 to 120 hours a week, you had that same similar vision. And now it's actually coming to fruition. What are some of those things that are now you're able to deliver on?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I talk about this ego component of wanting to be the best and being out in front, when in reality, I'm actually a very humble, understated person, right? And like those components of what I'm doing, right, are indifferent. If I can use them to help people, then great. So the business, right, and my purpose is all about enriching people's lives, as you articulated, right? I want someone to be better off as a result of any sort of engagement, a text, a conversation with me, regardless of if we do business or not, right? Like, how do I be that positive inspiration and light to people in the world, right? As I talk about that on the family front, right? Rachel does that through food. She's a chef, right? As we're sculpting our kids' lives, right? And what they're going to be programmed, right? I'm hopefully programming them in the way that I am now programmed versus how I was. But that enrichment is hugely important. We have always donated to charities, been involved in charities, wanted to be involved in the community. The company that we do essentially is involved in real estate on the debt side. So we're lending money to real estate investors primarily. And so we work with investors who are looking for return. We invested on their behalf in the real estate market. As the giving back and the real estate piece have come together, that's led us to this desire to solve an issue, right? And the biggest issue on the real estate side is affordability of housing, particularly for the middle and lower class. And so what we've committed to is essentially partnering with, donating, somehow contributing to workforce housing being built, right? So people can afford rent in the area that they're living on the wages that they're earning and not feel like they've got to move out or that they're spending too much of their income on rent, right? That they can have a fulfilled, sustainable life and, help their kids along the way. So we've committed to build 10,000 units of workforce housing or contribute to it in a meaningful way. And since we've made that decision, right, we've got a 20-unit complex that we're building from the ground up. We've got some JV partnerships that we're exploring for several hundred units. And that's all in the first 5 months of articulating what that vision is, right? So things have started to take off very, very quickly. The other side of the company is growing very, very well. Our returns to investors, no surprise, are above average and best in industry, as you would expect from me and my pedigree, right? And so all of those things are working in concert where, as one part grows, the whole is growing. And as the whole grows, it allows us to give back to the communities where we're lending and we're serving in a meaningful way, right? And starting to work on a lot of these projects to do some incredible things for people. And that is super exciting. Being able to touch people's lives and influence them in a meaningful way, right? Everything from our employees, right? We just gave them a pretty substantial raise to keep up with appreciation because it was the right thing to do, right? Not because we had to, but those are the choices that we're making, right? To help people be better off, right? With the borrowers and making sure they can find the financing so they can get their projects done, earn more money, gentrify areas, right? It all fits together in this enrichment, right? It all goes back to enriching people's lives, and to be able to do that, whether it's one person or one loan at a time or whole communities, is super exciting and what fuels us.
It does fuel us. And just hearing you talk about how you're actively putting into practice your values. And it's one thing to say that those are your values. It's totally different to actively be living them. And this is why I was so excited to have you on the show today, is you're a man who has been so committed to being able to live your values, and you've been open and coachable to making whatever changes and reprogramming required in order to actually allow you to live out this incredible vision that you've had and are now creating and enriching my life, the life of your team, your family, your extended family. I mean, we didn't even talk about the fact that both your brothers are part of your team, which is just absolutely amazing. You shared how all three of you were working together in such an incredible way. And one of your brothers took a picture and sent it to your parents. And as a mother of 3 boys, I'm like, oh man, that's amazing. That's just absolutely incredible. And I know that today thank you. You've spent a tremendous amount of time with us, sharing and inspiring and being that model that we were talking about in the beginning. You so often don't see it. We don't see it in books. We don't see it in movies. We certainly don't see it on social media. And this is why I felt it was so important for you to come on and share your story, because people need to know they don't have to stay in that trap of outworking everybody else 80 to 120 hours a week. And I know there are other people out there listening who are currently living that life. And like you, like me, are maybe believing that if I pull back, the business will collapse. And I don't want that. And Liam is here to be a beautiful shining light to say, look, it's not what you think. And there is a better way. And it includes reprogramming. It includes understanding and defining and living your values. It includes understanding a whole host of principles and understanding how to put those into practice and actually live them. Liam, thank you. This was absolutely incredible. I do have to ask, I know I told you I was going to ask you like 5 questions at the end, but I feel like I've already taken up a lot of your time. So I do want to ask one of these questions, which is, what's working now? And you can answer that. What's working inside of your business? What's working inside of your life? What's working for you?
One of the biggest changes in the last 6 months is working with you, right? And working with Katie, and really challenging those frames, right? And the programming that I've had, right? And that's, we were talking before the show, like having someone to help. She'll never give you answers. So if you want an answer, you're not going to get an answer, but to help guide you and help think through, right? Because ultimately you've got to make the decisions and you've got to lean into it, right? And so that is working for sure, right? And I think that has spurred a whole other host of things that are working in my life that are moving in a really, really powerful way, right? To get me to a place of, living with purpose, to be able to give back. And that's invigorated and pushed me in the right direction.
Wow. Well, thank you. I wasn't expecting that answer, but thank you. I really appreciate that. For everybody who's listening and wants to get in touch with Liam Leonard, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Liam Leonard. You can find me DML Capital, so dmlcap.com. You can also find me there. Email address is liam.leonard@dmlcap.com. So a host of different ways, right? And if you're feeling trapped or you want to talk, or you just want to bounce things off, feel free to reach out to me, and happy to help guide or provide perspective in whatever way that hopefully helps move your life as well.
So incredible. Liam, thank you. And if anybody's listening and like Liam wants an outside perspective, wants a guide, somebody to coach you through this process, I'm going to invite you to reach out to me. Send me a DM on Instagram, katie.live. Send me a DM. We can talk. And if I feel like you're potentially a fit, I'll show the next steps to you. But like Liam has shared, you don't have to live this life that someday you might regret. And there's a way out, and it's not what you would expect. And it's absolutely incredible work. And when you go through this process, like Liam, you get to be in a position where you're enriching so many lives. And it's meaningful. It's very meaningful. Yeah. So
yeah. Appreciate the
any last words, Liam?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to share the story, Katie, and hopefully it can touch someone out there, and that's why we do what we do. So yeah. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. I love how open you are and sharing and being specific and sharing those examples. I know it's going to help a lot of people. So thank you, Liam. And for everybody who's listening, this is what's working now.